And there it is. All right, and welcome everybody to your favorite weekly series, Grace Under Pressure, where we are interviewing roses from around the known world, starting off with just some people that we think would make some really good interviews. This week we are lucky enough to be joined by Count Yehuda ben Yitzhack of Northshield. Next week we're going to be joined by Duchess Conliac of the Outlands. But for now, hi everyone.
Yes, welcome Sir Joel de Grace, now of Callantyre by way of half of the known world that he's already lived in, which, you know, we should really be interviewing you, Joel, because I'm sure you have lots to say about all the different kingdoms you've lived in. So he is inspired by his lady Aniela, who's probably off of camera somewhere with a dog or dogs. I can never count how many fuzzy children they have there. And is fueled frequently by White Claw, but you were delighting us with some knockoff that you're drinking this week, Bud.
It's not a knockoff. This week is sponsored by Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade.
Yeah, so I was admonishing Joel that he should respect himself more than that, but I'm really not one to talk because I drink the Kirkland brand sparkling hard seltzer. Because it's even cheaper, Joel, but the flavors don't taste like cough syrup.
If I had a Costco membership, I would consider it, but I don't.
I live in Seattle. They practically give you one with a Seattle address. Like you really can't not have a Costco.
I was going to say, isn't it like you sign up for power, you sign up for internet, you sign up for Costco.
Exactly. You send your kid to the UW or to our competitor across the state. I mean, it's just the way here. So anyway,
we have Aldi's. That's what we got going on for us. $2 bottle of wine. Just saying. So, and as always, for everyone watching, I am joined by my favorite heckler in the world, Duchess Dagmere, who let's see here, and you know what, Dag, your introduction got a lot shorter, so it's going to throw it off. Well, I'm going to try and do this off the top of my head because I want to see if I can remember it. She has reigned, her first reign was as a princess of Sinagua in the West, and she has since gone on to have 2 reigns in Ontario with her husband, Duke Thorin Njálsson. This week's fun fact about her is that she deleted her introduction off of our introduction sheet, and I had to wing this off the top of my head. How was that?
I'm just seeing if you were paying attention.
I got it.
Okay, as always this week and every week, we'd like to extend a special thanks to Ashaxi and Rifkin for hosting us on the Sisters Interview Network and making these interviews available to your broad range of fans and devoted followers. We really appreciate all of the time and work you put into maintaining that service for the society, especially right now during our COVID days. And it means a lot to us that you allow us to participate here. So Joel, please introduce our guest who's so patiently waiting.
I know. Everyone watching from home, thank you so much for joining us. You know how much we appreciate your time coming in every week. This week, we are fortunate to be joined by Count Yehuda ben Yitzhack. Yehuda ben Yitzhack of Northshield, who reigned in 2016-2017, is a master of the Pelican and also a companion of the Rose. And Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us this week. We really appreciate you making the time to come and hang out with us.
Good to be here.
And he's a court baron. You know, court baron, before we start on our normal questions, court barons in kingdom to kingdom, they kind of seem to be handled a little differently. Yes, you know, and in Ontario, they're infrequently given, probably maybe once or twice a reign, but I've never thought to ask people what the customs and traditions are in their branches. We also have a custom that if you're stepping down as a landed baron and baroness, and if the crown deems you worthy, you become a baron of the court as well. So is that similar to Northshield?
Northshield has that custom. In addition to that, we tend to distinguish the court barony from other service honors in that the court barony is specifically for service to the crown, continual and frequent and above and beyond service to the crown. In my case, it was for my long years as a herald and my time as a barony seneschal. I believe I had just stepped up to be Polaris Herald for the second time when they stuck feathers on me. And yeah, so, and in Northshield, a court barony carries with it a grant of arms. And we did that, and I'm going to brag just a little bit. I'm the one who drafted that part of the law because I was Polaris the Herald the first time when we became a kingdom. So I was part of the drafting of the law. And I realized that in the mid-realm, court barony was listed as marching ahead of grant of arms in the order of precedence. Not that we often had precedent parade, but still. But did nothing to correct for the fact that if that court baron then moved to another kingdom where it ranked as an AOA or didn't rank at all, that individual would lose precedence by moving. And so I deliberately wrote it into our law that a court baron, long before I thought I would ever receive one, mind you, that a court barony would carry with it a grant of arms to ensure that the precedence that we assign to court barony in this kingdom carried with the recipient.
That's very, very geeky and important to people who care about it. And I love it. It's like, you know who loves that stuff? My husband. He loves that stuff. He loves and I'm like, great, just tell me where to stand. That's all I really care about. Where do I stand? Okay, that's it. Great. So we have the Lions of Ontir in Ontir. So the Lions of Ontir kind of jump the line ahead of everybody when there's any kind of precedence. But otherwise, it gets very confusing because all the different ways that people get lined up for processions or whatever. So, but long ago, go ahead.
Yeah, we made a decision also to simplify things. So like in some kingdoms, I know that certain orders, like certain grant orders, march ahead of certain other grant orders and peerages and so on. There's like fine gradations of who marches where. And we just said, you know what? You've got an award of arms, you've got an award of arms. Your precedence is in the order you received your award of arms, whatever it is. Same with the grant, same with your peerage.
Right. Yeah. No,
we kept it very straightforward and said, you know what? All peerages are equal, all grants are equal, and all awards of arms are equal. And those are the only formal precedences other than royal peerage that we recognize.
Well, if I can geek out with you for just a second, it's a little bit sad, but it's good sad, I guess. We have a custom in Ontir called the riderless horse, which is our final way of marking someone's importance to the kingdom after they've passed. And so we have a riderless horse wearing, basically its regalia is former kingdom regalia that comprises it. And then it's, we put tassels for each person who's passed. And it can be someone who was super deeply involved in the kingdom or someone who just lived here for 6 months. We don't care. But the question was, is this an award? And that was early on, trying to figure out how to indicate that someone had been recognized on the riderless horse and a way to do it that wouldn't feel horrible, because if you put it in the award list, that's like super tacky. But then weird. How do you make sure that it's indicated or marked? And now it's just a link, and it's a very quiet way of letting people know that somebody has passed and that we've recognized that. But it was one of those questions where like the system of award, you know, the OP and how we record awards and all of that was kind of coming in conflict with the, you know, what's appropriate and what the optics of something would be, but also wanting to make sure that we were being accurate and that we had already recognized somebody. So, but it is kind of our final recognition, and we don't include any titles when we announce people's names. We don't use any ranks, any titles. It's completely alphabetical. And so everyone is just known by their SCA name, and that's how they're announced, and that's it. and this was really important to us too, because we have all this emphasis on awards and rank and privilege and all of that in the SCA, but when we pass, none of that matters because the loss is felt the same from one family to the next, irrespective of the rank somebody had in the society. So, and in Ontir, the consorts of Ontir are the stewards of that. And so they're the ones who actually bring that piece of court business to the court, and they control it basically, because that way it doesn't matter who's reigning, it doesn't matter whose offices, what officers are filled by what. The people who are in the companions of the Rose and Valorous Estate, we are the ones who have that continuity. And so we steward it, and it's worked out really well for us because, and it's sad business, but we are all able to carry the weight evenly across our whole order.
Yeah.
So I thought as a herald, you might appreciate the.
I do, and we do not have anything similar right now in Northshield.
Well, it came. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do. Obviously, we do various things to recognize. Nothing quite that.
We got the idea because we were getting posthumous award recommendations.
Yeah.
So people would say, "Oh, this person passed away and they never had their AOA or their this or that," and we were like, "It's not." We just didn't feel it was appropriate to give people awards when they couldn't consent to accepting them, and also just it's not the right thing to do. And so a group of the companions got together, and we wanted to involve the equestrian community because equestrian's really, really heavily part of the Ontir culture as well. And so having your horse be used as the riderless horse is a big honor, and people dress up their horses and clean them up, and it's really beautiful. So but it also allows us to always have a place to put that. It's a place to put that grief where we can look forward to it and share it as a community, and it's the same for every single person. And we just really thought that was so important, that some people get more attention than others. So anyway, sorry, this isn't about me, but I just think it's super fascinating.
I enjoy hearing about that custom. Like every now and then I hear about kingdom customs and I'm like, really? That one kind of like.
Yeah, or just
really kind of like.
Where did it come from? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was inspired by Kennedy's, the riderless horse that was used during Kennedy's public processional, and that's still very much a part of people's consciousness. And but of course, it's a tradition that goes back. We don't do anything terrible to the horse after the ceremony, though. I do want to emphasize that. So we just take pretty pictures. So anyway, so back to our script, which this is your first of many softball questions this evening, Yehuda, and that is, tell us about your SCA origins. What brought you to the SCA? And
oh Lord, all right. So I attended Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, the Dominion of Merkphalan. For those of you in the audience who have never heard of Merkphalan, Merkphalan is not a shire. They are not a canton. They are not a barony. They are a dominion. They are not part of the kingdom of Ethelmark. They are merely surrounded by it, or so they will insist. They have laws that include, and at the time that I was part of them, they were still part of the East, mind you, or surrounded by the East. They have laws that include things like the king of the East is a nice guy. There is no high table in the Dominion of Merkphalan, but a high chair will be provided upon request. Things like that. So I came to it in a very odd way, and the truth is that mainly I was going for the social. I never went to an event. I never garbed up. I went to the meetings because it was a place where there were nerds whose company I enjoyed. Several of my friends were already part of it. Yeah, right. Nerds in the SCA.
Can't imagine. I prefer dork. I call us dorks. So
dork, nerd, geek. I'll take it all. Really. I've been at this a long time, and I have simply reclaimed all of the words that used to be pejorative for us and said, "Well, yes, I am." So at Cornell, they met in a building called Risley Hall. Risley Hall is basically a Tudor red brick castle in the middle of Ithaca, New York, to the point where their dining hall looks like it came out of a storybook. It really does, or right out of an unslighted castle from England. it is perfect. It is dark red, dark wood paneling and stonework, and it's just great. So it was sort of a natural fit for the SCA. And in fact, the only event I attended, my then fiance dragged me almost by the hair too, because she thought I should finally see an event. It was Ethelmar Coronet Tourney. It was being held at Risley. And Merkphalan had graciously deigned to host this foreign kingdoms, foreign principalities event, because of course, you know, the fiction of being independent. And I got there and I said, so what should I do? And she's like, well, there's a tournament. They need heralds. You're allowed. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. But I did not fully appreciate this at first. So I went, I had a very good time heralding the tourney, or helping to herald the tourney. And I didn't really think much of it beyond that. And then not very long afterward, I received an offer I couldn't refuse that moved us here to the Twin Cities. And I didn't exactly forget about it, but I'm like, okay, I'm basically starting all over for everything. And I was working for a startup, and frankly, I was a budding workaholic. And so for like the first 2 years here, I didn't really make much of an effort to do anything social. I had my work, and I geeked out a lot on computer games and so on, and didn't necessarily do much to put down roots.
But you
My wife
probably
on the
felt
No,
you
go
probably
ahead.
felt right at home because of all the Scandinavians there. They're all
You
at
know,
home too.
except they're not actually. They're really not. This is actually a pretty social, like even in the wintertime, people go, except right now, you know, right now during the pandemic, everyone's at home, of course. But no, this actually turns out to be a very geeky town and a very gregarious town. I'll go into that a little more later, but for now, the point is
You
that
got
after
different
about,
Swedes than we did in Seattle.
yeah, after 2.5 years of this, my wife once again dragged me by the hair to a Nordskogen meeting. And I found other nerds to talk to, and the rest was hysteria. And I really didn't think that I was necessarily going to get very deeply involved. My wife actually likes to chant a litany of the things I said I would never do. You'll never get me into garb. You'll never get me to an event. I'll never hold an office. God, why would I ever think of reigning? I don't fight, so I'll certainly never put myself on the throne anyway. So, and yeah, except for the never fighting heavy part, which I never have done, I've pretty much done everything I said I would never do.
That's really funny.
And as I said before, once you start down the dark path of heraldry, forever will it dominate your destiny. I gravitated back to vocal heraldry almost as soon as I became active. I started helping to herald the local coronet tourneys. We were still principality at the time. We had actually just become a principality a little bit before I started actively participating. So eventually I got into court heraldry and found myself eventually getting good enough that I was volunteering to do the mid-realm royal courts when they were here without their own herald. And I spent quite a few years being sort of the unofficial, if the mid-realm is here, the mid-realm has sent the crown here, and they have not brought their own herald, tap me and I will herald their courts. Because Polaris's job at the time was to herald Northshield's courts, principality courts. And I thought it was very important that they get to do that and not get sort of pulled up to the kingdom level. And they agreed, actually. They were very happy with that. So that was sort of where it all began.
So you mentioned a Polaris herald.
Polaris
What-
is the principal
Polaris.
herald of, yeah, Polaris is the title given to the principal herald of Northshield, and
Oh.
and was at the time the principality herald of Northshield.
So not the most principled herald.
No,
Just the,
not the most principled
No.
herald, just the principal
Got it.
herald.
Ah.
Basically, the kingdom officer in charge of heraldry.
Okay.
So I eventually found myself becoming Polaris Principality Herald in the initial run up to independence. Like we had pretty much just gotten the nod that we were going to be allowed to become a kingdom. And as a result, I found myself deeply involved with the crafting of ceremonies, the crafting of our laws around the award structure and things like that, and helping to navigate those things, particularly during the initial heirship of the first king and queen, Siegfried and Breda, helping to guide their deliberative process as they tried to figure out what kind of award structure they wanted. How did they want it to look? How did they want it to feel? What sort of names did we want? Did we even want a naming scheme, or did we just want to wing it and see whatever seemed cool at the time?
it's such
Um,
a missed opportunity because they could have structured it around the Safeway Monopoly stickers, or was that McDonald's? Who did the Monopoly stickers where you would, get
That was
you'd have to
McDonald's.
match all of those? Was it McDonald's? I think
Yeah.
Safeway around here does something else. But you really could have made this truly egalitarian and just based it on, the amount of time people spend at events and just given them stickers for it,
there we go.
and then just let them add those up. It's not too late. You still could.
I don't know. We're going on 18 years or something like that. We've been.
Yeah. I mean, that ship's probably
Noble.
sailed.
No,
You're right.
Oh my. Okay, hold on. No, I'm just bad at math.
It's been a minute. I know. It's like, how long have you been in the SCA, Joel?
I had to think about it too,
Uh,
actually.
Penzic, so the big Penzic that Northshield went to, that was its last Penzic before it went Kingdom, was it? Penzic 33. That was my second event I went to. So 2004, 2005?
Yes, 2004.
I'm from the West Coast. We don't mark time by what Penzic it is. So
Yeah.
And
Well,
I've
that's
never been to
that's an easy
Penzic,
measuring
so
stick.
I am, by the way, seeing in the comments that Safeway and Ralph's also did a Monopoly sticker thingy. So I don't feel quite as off as I did. So
Well,
So the
So,
other thing I had done along the way as a herald and a software engineer was I had written a trial system for doing heraldic commentary online. Today we have Oscar. It turns out that Oscar was being developed at about the same time I was developing my system, which I called Baldric. Oscar became the basis of the society-wide commentary system that is in use even today. Baldric we used at the local level, and it was really geared for the local level from the beginning. But those two experiments were like the earliest experiments beyond just doing it online with doing it in email, I should say, doing it email mailing lists, with trying to streamline the heraldic commentary process, which up until that point had involved an awful lot of photocopying and an awful lot of postage.
So you're a full
love them all
service.
over.
You're a full service herald. You do all of it. You do the book heraldry. You do the voice heraldry.
At the time, I considered myself not much of a book herald. I still consider book heraldry not to be my strength, but as a herald, and particularly as someone who was moving, I had sort of already been tapped to eventually become Polaris. I felt like I needed to understand how all of it worked, and I also felt very strongly that I needed to see if I could help improve the way that it worked. And there was receptiveness, particularly here in Kingdom. And if I remember correctly, and of course, memory doesn't always serve, it wasn't actually even originally my idea. I was approached by one of the other book heralds, the late Morrigan Drummond, approached me knowing that I was a software guy. And it was really her idea. And one of the ideas she had for it was that the commentary would be completely public, it would be completely in the open. Who could be a commenter would still be controlled, but we would not hide the commentary. It would not be a deep, dark secret. That was very controversial. It's still very controversial in the College of Heralds, as I understand it. The sort of top level commentary for submissions for names and devices is still not public. Kingdoms have the option to make theirs public, and Northshield made it policy that the internal level of commentary would be public. And that was done partially for the educational value of it, that people should be able to see what's going on. But frankly, it was also done to deliberately cut down on some of the snark.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to see what you have to say, so you better think about what you're going to say.
That's right.
Oh, I
Be-
appreciate
be
that
courteous.
so much.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
appreciate it.
Yeah, we all can. Every one of us has an opportunity to let that part of ourselves fly, and I'm sure we've all done it. But you don't need to go on any kind of official record. And also,
Right.
people when they register their heraldry have put a lot of thought into it, and so it's a particularly fraught thing to feel like somebody with that kind of institutional power can just strike down what you want to do, which may have really been important to you, right? Even if it is ill-considered. So the best piece of advice I ever got, and it was from David of Moffat, who he is now passed, but he was a heraldic monster of Antir, as they like to joke. He was absolutely one of the most knowledgeable scholars of heraldry the SCA has ever known, and he was just incredible, and he lived in the barony where I started. So when I went to him and said, this is what I want, he's like, yep, that'll pass. And it did. Like, he could tell just by looking at something, he's like, yep, that'll pass. And it's like, what? He just had that kind of knowledge. But his advice was, go to somebody like that. Go to your heralds before you submit it. Not after. So,
and
talk to them.
Devices and things, those are those ones that I've noticed frequently talking to people that there's a stigma of, oh, they won't pass it anyways, or there's this stigma almost of people thinking that the heralds are out to get them and they just don't want to approve their stuff. And we've run into some that are more confrontational than others about bad ideas, and we've run into some that are like, oh, you want to put a hand and a broken lance on your heraldry? Cool, let's figure it out, make it work.
Yeah.
So but so it's just, that's one of those, like, it's a great opportunity to encourage people into it by making commentary open and knowing what's being said about their.
And
so
I spent a lot of time encouraging our consulting heralds to take that more positive approach of tell them what they can do, help them figure out how they can do what they want to do within the rules. It was very important to me that, like, we shouldn't bend over backward customer service necessarily, but we don't have to be mean.
Yeah.
We actually had a gimmick for a while here. You said you had the heraldic monsters in Antir. We had the Dark Heralds of the Sith. We decided, if they're gonna say we're evil anyway, we're gonna lean into it for a little while. And so we had a gimmick of the Dark Heralds of the Sith. We find your lack of documentation disturbing. We've leaned out of that since, in part because, at the risk of getting political just for a moment, we've seen enough real evil very close to home in the world that it's just not that much fun playing it being evil anymore.
Yeah.
But
that's such a good point.
But also, I think in part through efforts of myself and my successors as Polaris, and through the efforts of the College of Arms itself, including reformulating the rules about a decade ago now, the new standards, which are much clearer. It's much easier to explain why something is good, is bad, how to work with the system than it used to be. So I think there's been a lot of good effort in that regard that has helped. But you're right, there is still, people get upset when you tell them they can't have a symbolism that is important to them.
I mean, they can't pass it. That's really the reality here. They can't they can't get it passed, but that doesn't, if they want to use it, they can use it. It's just, there's some limitations, but I think that from the customer service standpoint, if you want people to participate, as you've said, you have to lower the barriers to entry and make it so that people desire something that's period and something that can be documented because it's cool, not because they have to have it or because it's some kind of meaningless gatekeeping that's keeping them from fully expressing their SCA identity. We have a lot of people from non or Midgeris cultures in Ontario. So people that, you know, they're Scythian or they're, you know, they're pre-heraldry or whatever. And so there's a lot of creativity here. And I think the heralds here have really worked with people. I don't know if that's always been the case, but now like it's pretty normal to say, well, I want to register my Viking era arms, you know, what do you got for me? You know, I think there's a lot more flexibility and sort of desire to help.
The only reason I ever submitted my device finally was because I had to have it submitted at least to Fighting Crown. I'm a bad stick jock. Sorry. So
we don't have that. We don't have that requirement in Ontario, Joel. You can move here.
We'll see where they send me. It was actually a long time before I submitted my own name or my device. I actually I went through my entire first term as Polaris without a submitted name or device. I had two names that I knew were documentable. There was the one I'm using now, Yehuda ben Yitzhack, and there was Malvichel Magillafeder, which was my Scots persona. Who dressed Malvichel Magillafeder.
Okay, yeah, I would have gotten that right.
See. And I didn't register in part as a little bit of a protest against how complicated the rules were at the time. I encouraged other people who wanted to register. I didn't tell anyone, hey, you shouldn't. But I also wanted to make it clear that you didn't have to. There's nothing in Northshield except that sometimes the Crown will require you to have something at least in process in order to fight in the tourney. It's not a law that you must, but individual crowns will sometimes set that as a bar, and that's their right. Absolutely their right. But there's nothing else in Northshield for which we require registered name, registered device. And so I wanted to send the message, hey, you don't have to if you really don't want to. It's okay. When I was Polaris Herald the second time, coincided with the new rules coming out. And we had a drastic fall off in consulting heraldry. We didn't have as many people going to events, setting up tables to help people figure out their names and devices. And I felt this was one of the first things I had to do, even not thinking of myself as a book herald, coming back to the office, was reestablish this. And I took a kind of Yan Can Cook approach. If you remember, Yan Can Cook is a cooking TV series. His catchphrase was, if Yan can cook, so can you. And I said, you all know I'm not really a book herald, but this is how good these new rules are and how easy they are to follow. I am going to do consulting tables until I get enough other consulting heralds that I don't have to. And I'm finally going to register my name and device.
That's really important. I really appreciate that. And it sounds like this was all sort of an important part of your pathway to being the Crown, that, you know, that well instilled sense of service and duty and accessibility. And I really appreciate that. You know, often I find, well, we have found in these interviews, but just I find in general, when I talk with people who have been royal consorts, the desire to make things better is a big part of their DNA, or it's something that they become really committed to after their reigns. Because it's, you see that you do have the capacity, you have the ability as an individual to change things and to make things better for other people. And that's really, really important.
So you really you set a precedent in the known world with your first reign, which we'll bring up in a later question. But now that you've had the experience, and what would current you that has gone through this reign and seen the world since then, what would you go back and tell pre-reign you, or what advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
When Rhoda and I decided to go ahead and do it, and I'll tell that story in a minute if you want me to, because the story itself is fun. But when we decided to go ahead, we were aware that this was going to be important to people. We were aware that we were going to be making a statement just by doing it. We were aware that people were going to have strong feelings, positive and negative. We were not going to be just another reign. It was going to be a big deal. Even knowing that going in, we were not entirely prepared for the outpouring we received. Almost all of which, in terms of what actually got to us, was positive. That was the biggest surprise. I had catastrophized about any number of ways that it could turn into a big stank, and it didn't. And I knew it was going to be important to people, but even knowing that, I didn't know how important. And I don't know if I would have done anything differently, because the minute I saw how important it was, I mean, I was already taking it seriously. But in terms of being emotionally prepared for other people's emotional reactions, I might go back and tell myself, okay, however important you think this is going to be, multiply it by 10, by 20, in some cases, maybe by 50. You are opening a door for people.
Yehuda, let's go ahead and tell the story, if you would, of what you're referring to, just on the off chance somebody's watching 20 years from now and doesn't know why this is significant, because the world has gotten so much better that this isn't even remarkable anymore.
Right. So it almost started as a joke. My protege at the time, Katarinka, who is currently Polaris Herald, actually, Katarinka and I were doing lunch like 2-3 days after they announced inspirational equality was actually a thing. Like they'd approved it. They'd said, yes, go ahead. We can do this now. And she said, half jokingly, Broder should totally fight for you. Broder had already been, he was the last prince of the principality, and he had already been king with Anne Jeffreys of Warwick and with Julia. And he and I were friends because I'd been his herald. That's how I got to know him, was being his herald. And when I herald, if I've got a crown who knows how to turn it into theater, I lean into that. I lean into the improv aspect of it. We like to do very entertaining courts in Northshield. Some people, it's not to their taste, to be honest, but that's how we like to do it here. And so he and I had gotten a thing going. And she said, you two should totally reign. And she texts him with it. And that's the last I hear of it. And that's fine, because I don't think anything of it. The next crown tournament, I'm getting ready to help herald it. I'm sitting by the list field. And he sidles up to me and says, when am I fighting for you? And I look at him and I said, are you serious? Because if you're serious, we'll do this. And I've got a historical angle that will make this work. My persona, Yehuda ben Yitzhack, is a Khazar. The Khazars had a two-king system, a Kagan and a Bek. He was Norse. Kiev and Rus, who were, of course, mainly a Norse offshoot culture, Kiev was a Khazar city.
Yeah.
This worked. This immediately meshed. So we had documentation that would immediately diffuse the number one argument we would get. It's not period.
Right. As you fight on an Eric using rattan.
We actually don't call it the Eric out here, by the way. That's that Westernism has never penetrated past the Rockies, I don't think. We just
You
call
keep
it
your
West.
Westernism over there, Dad.
That's right.
You understand the
I just-
point. Yes.
Yes, I do absolutely see the point. But I knew that the first thing people would use in order to hide their other objections was it's not
Right.
period.
Right.
And I could name 5 examples off the top of my head, and I was already representing a culture that was one of those exceptions as Yehuda. What I did not fully appreciate until later in this evolution is that Froder grew up with 2 mothers.
Oh.
At a time when that was not common.
Right. That's very cool.
And so we immediately realized that we had another hook, another angle, which is, yes, he and I are not a couple. He and I are straight. But we are doing this to open the door.
Yeah.
We are doing this to demonstrate that it's not going to break the society to do this.
Right.
And so knowing that historical side of it, knowing that we were going to need to diffuse that, I had a website ready to go so that the morning after Crown Tournament, I'd push a button and boom, it would be live and the link would go out. And the minute people started saying, but it's not period, we could paste that link out and said, yeah, here's our research. It worked. That's really all I have to say about it is it worked. Most people saw the research and said, well, I still don't like it. But you've got the
That's
receipts.
that's a different issue.
Right.
Not wanting to see it or
Right.
not liking it is a
Right.
different issue. And the
And
faster people deal with that, the better. So
And I have to admit, I'm really glad that we fought that tournament and started that process before that election. This was
Yeah.
This was the spring of 2016, if I remember correctly. So we
Yep.
fought that tournament before the madness that was coming. Because I don't know if being the first now would have gone as easily. I think a lot of the people who just didn't like it would get much more belligerent. And now that may be more catastrophizing, because like I said, at the time, I was expecting more negativity. And we didn't get it. Most people who didn't like it either just said, well, I don't like it, but it's only for 6 months, so whatever. Or they gave it a
Right.
shot. And we got very little bullshit, for which I'm
Yeah.
very thankful. And more to the point,
Well,
we
and
got tremendous support from within our own kingdom.
And that's who you were serving ultimately. But also, I think there's something to be said for taking that risk. And as straight men, you know, any of that derision or catastrophe that could have come, taking that on so that someone who is in a same-sex couple or some other form of a couple that wouldn't have been recognized previously is able to step into it with your precedent set, you know, where they can say, no, this really does work. And these people accepted that risk. And in that way, it's a way of using the privilege of rank in the SCA as a force for good. And that's something we really try to emphasize in these interviews. So we see that and appreciate that very much.
And we were very conscious of it. He was already a Duke. I had already been Polaris Herald twice. I had been Seneschal of my barony for 3 years. And I had a lot of friends around the world from the internet and from the SCA. We were both known and we were both using that. And
Yeah.
without, we weren't like, we didn't necessarily put a big trumpet on it most of the time, but we were conscious of the fact that we were using our position to open the door.
You were investing your social capital so future generations could also.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's really
Very much.
important. I think also, again, in 20 years, hopefully we'll look back and say, what was the fuss about? You know, sort of the way we do now with women fighting and becoming knights, you know, and the controversy that originally accompanied that, which was also really silly. So hopefully, as reigns like yours occur, but the thing that I also try to draw attention to is that there are a lot of women in the SCA who fight for their women partners, their female partners. And I would suggest that there are probably actually more of them than couples who are men who are likely to reign. And that, you know, we do need to really be cognizant of how this is a disproportionate effect, because women are also underrepresented in the chivalry and among the reigning pairs. And one of the concerns I've heard is that having two men on the throne really further disenfranchises women in authority. And I'd be super curious to hear how you feel about that. And sorry, I said it would be softball questions. That's not very softball.
No. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the few concerns that I received from someone close to me, from a friend, was that exact concern, that now, from this point forward, given the preponderance of men winning crown, as far as I know, it is still true that only 2 women have won crown.
It's 2 or 3.
More have won coronets, but I think only 2
low,
women have won crown in the history of the society.
I think it's 3.
Maybe it's 3 now. You may be right, but the point is, it's not common. It is vanishingly rare, and given that, the gender balance of royalty has now permanently tipped, was her concern.
Right.
And I saw it and I understood it. I will tell you right now, I live for the day that a woman puts another woman on the throne.
Yep.
I really do. I really live for that day, not just to address the balance, but because when we opened the door, we were opening the door for that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I will admit I wasn't thinking about it as much 4 years ago, which shows you how quickly certain things have changed. I lived for the first time a non-binary combatant put someone of any gender or no gender at all as their consort on the throne.
Yeah.
It may be a while. It may be a while, but I lived for that day. That was the door we were opening.
Yeah. It's really important. I know it was an important part of why you reigned, but it didn't define your entire reign. So maybe we can look at some pictures and
Please.
see some of the fun stuff that you have done or get involved in. Oh, Rifkin says 2 queens by their own hand in the comments. Oh, and a bunch of people are saying it in the other comments here too. So this is awesome.
My bad.
I'm not actually watching the Facebook side of this at all, so I'm not seeing any.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't, but you know, there are some fun conversations going in there, but that's how I found out about the fact that the Monopoly thing was accurate. So it's really important to me. I do watch for it. So,
but I was still right also. That's
so
always
I'm
important.
I'm gonna get our photos queued up here.
Sure.
So continue to talk amongst yourselves. All right. It always takes me a second because I want to make sure I don't show people nefarious things that I've been doing.
Nefarious is just such a fun word in it.
I love the word nefarious. It's a great word.
So
Well, I like
my recent new favorite word, by the way, is it's one that's I don't know if it's only like I only ever hear it used by military people, and that's notional, which I've been in
Ooh.
the Army full time for 12 years, and I just recently learned that notional means make believe.
Yep.
as
So
in
now if someone asks me if I'm in the office for the day, I can respond notionally. So that's my new favorite word. I always thought it meant like optimal or something like that, but no, I found out it means make believe. So there, that's a thing you know now.
that's a good word.
In
One of my
theory,
my son is autistic, and one of the words that we talk about in autism is perseveration, which comes from the same root as persevere. And it's the idea that sometimes people with autism will perseverate on an activity or a thought, or we don't use the word obsessive because that's not really what's happening. It has more to do with being sort of stuck, like on a record gets stuck on a single note. And but it is such a great way to describe it, because it's not only my autistic son, but also my dachshund is also very, very much subject to perseveration. And so we joke a lot with my kid that he and the dachshund have a lot in common, and that's a more fun way of thinking about it than thinking about his autism. So he likes that. So, well, let's start with this lovely photo here, which we used for our promotional materials. This is great. You're hovering menacingly
I'm hovering.
over
Yes, I
somebody
believe
else.
that I was heralded. So that is at the time Queen and Jeffries of Warwick reigning with Froder, as it happens. And I assume that if I'm up there smugly smiling like that, I was probably heralding or accompanying them during a tournament or something like that. Like I wasn't actively heralding with that posture, but I was probably there to herald for them and hanging out with them. And
Right.
that smirk was almost certainly directed to Froder.
Okay.
Froder had probably just said something because that's Froder.
Great picture. Yeah.
Yeah, so this would be me being Herald. And specifically, this is the day they stuck feathers on me and I had no idea it was coming.
Ah,
I am here opening the court that I never really got to finish heralding because I got.
that's great.
Explain the one glove. What's going on with the glove?
Oh, yeah.
I don't tend to wear belts with my garb, whether it's Tudor garb or the Byzantine garb I'm wearing today. I don't wear a belt, so I could not wear a yellow belt as a protege, so I had a yellow glove.
That's convenient for if you're cleaning out the biffs or something, right?
I never used it for that.
Heck.
It is
No.
not it is not one of those yellow gloves.
I have to tell you a really quick story because it's about one of my favorite humans in the whole world, the late Obadiah the Obstreperous, who I was dating at the time in the West Kingdom. And he was a fantastic human. But he was a quadruple laurel. He was a royal or a quadruple peer. He was a royal peer and a pelican and a knight and a laurel. And he and I hadn't been dating very long. And it's like 6 a.m. and we're walking around an event, and he basically cleaning up because there had been a vigil the night before, and the chemical toilets hadn't been pumped. And he's concerned that people would not be able to go to the bathroom in the morning. So he had found a really big stick and was poking down the contents of these chemical toilets. And this is significant because he's telling me the story. Yeah, he's telling me the story of how he was knighted, and the jokes and all of this. And then how he was made a laurel and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, but I don't know why they made me a pelican, as he's like actively poking down the contents of these chemical toilets with a big stick. And I just looked at him. I'm like, gee, I can't imagine why anybody would think that you were worthy of a pelican. So my joke was only, that could have been a reasonable activity for you to be engaged in with a yellow glove.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
You
Now
would have
that I have
liked
the
Hobbs
context,
very
now that I have the concept, now that I have the context of that, it makes much more sense.
Makes
Yeah,
perfect sense, doesn't it?
that's one of those inside jokes that definitely requires context for people to understand.
So
Or
this
you
is
just
me.
accept the non sequitur, Joel, for what it
Yeah,
is.
That's fair.
So,
I love non sequiturs. So this is the vigil the same day. The cookie I'm eating had been decorated. There was basically part of the vigil included decorate your own cookie. And my protege, or the person who was going to become my protege, because of course I wasn't a Pelican yet, my student had decorated a cookie in more or less my garb. So I was eating my own head off here.
great.
That may be earlier the same day. That may be just another shot from that day.
Well, let's compare your facial hair. I don't think so.
Yeah. No, it may be
Your beard's
no,
longer.
but it's the same garb, and I'm still using my green book. I eventually switched with some controversy to using an iPad for court because I have carpal tunnel and holding a book is physically
Oh.
painful. So for the
Yeah.
most part, I actually herald off a disguised iPad.
Makes perfect sense to me. I really appreciate your commitment as a Pelican to also representing period clothing and being as period as possible. Not many people get the headwear correct, so.
I don't even, honestly, I don't even remember the full context of this photo, but it was a fun photo that I found in my archive, and I'm like, yep, that goes up.
I mean, so many things wrong with that plastic helmet, besides the horns. The horns are just a starting point.
Well, and wearing it in my baronial coronet.
It's
thought was
beautiful.
really- yeah.
I mean, that's going to star in my favorite documentary now, personally. So
On Coronation Day, at one point during the opening court, during the coronation court, Roeder had said something, I don't remember what, it set the audience off, after which I said, dignity, always dignity.
Well, that makes sense because in
That
the
has become my
comments,
motto.
someone made a joke about that earlier.
yeah, one of the
Yeah.
first comments. Oh, it was Joe, whose name just dropped out of my head as soon as I said it. Said dignity, always dignity.
Yes, and they were there.
And somebody else said so much dignity. So people are definitely commenting on this.
Yes.
In the comments, which is really funny.
Yep.
Sorry, what was that, John?
Giuseppe.
Giuseppe. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I knew it started with a
Yes.
G, but I was like, Gary, Gus,
Yeah.
those are not period names.
And
No.
and they were at that coronation, so they got to
yeah.
witness dignity, always dignity firsthand.
You know, it occurs to me that this helmet, though, if you were able to take the horns off and fill them with water and freeze them, you could really like air condition your head at an event.
And if I'm remembering any of the context of that photo correctly, that would have been a good day for it too.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. You know, we were talking about I'm talking about starting another like podcast thing where we interview people as an advice column type thing, like an agony aunt. And one of the things I've thought about doing was taking non-period items and having the guest hosts try and help me figure out what period they're from and what their function was. And this would be a great example of something where we could be like, what is this? You know, how is this used in period? So
this is period air conditioning.
Yeah.
So this is from the Crown tournament that Roeder fought for me. We are sitting with the other combatants and consorts during the procession, basically during the introductions.
I love this. Did any of these sort of rites and traditions feel, or did you look at them through the gaze of they had been feminized at some point to the point where it didn't feel like you didn't fit in that tradition as a potential consort or consort?
You know, I worried that would be the case, but at least in Northshield, I never felt that.
That's great.
And I never felt like none of the other consorts ever made me feel, either the ones that had actually like were also roses or members of Persephone's Circle, which is for our principality consorts, or the other consorts that day being fought for. No one ever made me feel the least bit awkward. I was also very worried about it going to Gulf Wars. I had no idea what to expect going to events that were geared towards consorts at a great war. I'd never even been to a great war. Gulf Wars to this day, that year, the only great war I've ever been to. And
That's a good one to go to, though.
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I had no idea what to expect, and all that I received was welcome.
That's really nice to hear. And they had a little time to prepare.
Mhm.
That's important. And I don't know about other kingdoms, but in Ontir, when we took the restrictions out of kingdom law in anticipation that the bod at some point would allow same gender or same sex couples into the lists, we also immediately started some of our court heralds started writing up new customary so that there was the option of using non-gender specific customary for the ceremonies.
We had done something similar. I had, as I said, I'd been Polaris a second time, and part of that included after I'd been Polaris the second time, I took on the role of I don't know what we're calling it. Minister of Protocol. That's it.
Oh.
I took on the role of Minister of Protocol specifically to make some improvements to the Book of Ceremony, and that included a run where I enlisted some help and revised some of the language exactly for similar purposes. Yeah. And that was before I was even certain that Frodo was going to fight for me. So I didn't even know it was going to wind up applying that directly.
And as I previously mentioned when we were interviewing Duchess or Countess Laurel Gwyn, I'm super impressed that you all have the book and you're that organized. So I'm just throwing that out there. But that's from a non.
Yeah, we had a book of ceremony in the Principality days, and then actually the earlier mentioned Mistress Morag had put together a lot of our original ceremonies for the first book, so that we were prepared for it for first pollination, and we used that book has evolved since, but we've used it ever since. So this picture
is adorable.
Thank you. So we have a tradition in Northshield that started with our first, or I think maybe our second. I regret that I'm forgetting the order. But Princess Gwyneth Felton, held a tourney to determine who was going to be her champion. And the winner received the actual sleeve off of her dress.
Oh.
That same sleeve has become a symbol that has been passed down ever since. And we usually call it the Princess's Sleeve Tourney. Obviously, under these conditions, it was the title I was using was Tarkhan, which was the nearest Khazar title I could find to Prince. This was the day of the tourney, and so that kitten that got handed to me while we were there became known as the Tar Kitten. And so this is me watching that tournament. Every consort who holds the tournament during their airship has certain ability to tweak the rules and to tweak what's going to happen. What I determined was that one way or the other, the winner of the tournament would hold the sleeve, but would not necessarily become my champion. I would choose my champion based on what I saw on the field, based on the spirit that I saw, because I wanted someone who I felt represented me as my champion, my personality as my champion. And so that's how it wound up going. And they did wind up being two separate people, but other people stick with sort of the very original intent, which is that the victor not only holds the sleeve, but becomes the consort's champion for not necessarily for the duration of their reign, but at least the duration of their heirship. Oh, and to be clear, this is a rapier tournament that's being held. This is from Coronation Day. So you can see we're already starting being very dignified.
That's funny.
I really don't even know like specifically what was going on there, but obviously
No, but I
someone
think
decided-
all of our guests should have to caption all their photos like this, I think, from
Oh,
now
yeah.
on.
Yep.
That would be
And I did not,
very
by the way, this is
entertaining.
someone else had actually captioned this years ago now. And it's in my Facebook archive. And so I'm like, yeah, this one definitely has to go in there, along with
So-
all the much more dignified pictures.
Oh.
And
I will say, just from looking, that y'all's crowns look a lot lighter than some of the other ones that we've seen on here.
Yeah, no, these are definitely the lighter set. There's like, as kings, we had the choice of like 4 different crowns, and as heirs, we had more like 6 because we still have the principality crowns. The principality coronets are still in circulation. So there was a tremendous variety we could choose from. Visually, the ones I actually prefer are the ones you saw a few slides back that Duchess Anne was wearing with the plaques, the hinged plaques. But in
Mhm.
terms of comfort to wear, these were my favorite by far.
Yeah, just that's something I've started noticing now doing these interviews, is the ones where they had to talk about like the padded hats with the brims, and they look great and beautiful, but like I just think about the headache that would come. Sorry. Moving on.
There's a reason I'm wearing a hat under this coronet. This coronet is kind of heavy. So I'm snuggling an axe here. There's a story, of course. This axe is actually a relic of state. And the axe head was gifted to us by Garrick and Yasmin, who at the time were Callantyr, but had been Northshield, or Yasmin at least had been Northshield. And Garrick gifted this to the kingdom, the axe head. So the head is an actual relic. It's an actual artifact. The handle is entirely modern. And this, along with the 2 swords, we have a sword of state that was gifted to us by the Midrealm, and we have an older sword called Griffin's Justice that was the principality sword of state and had been the personal sword of a man named Sir Angus Ulrich. A lot of our kingdom's traditions and values derive from Angus, but he passed away before we became a principality. And his sword is still one of our swords of state. And the saltire from his arms became the inspiration for a distinctive order we have in Northshield called the Order of the Saltire, that is specifically for people who travel and teach.
Cool.
But getting back to the axe, because it's an actual relic, people swear that it sings or whispers to them when they hold it in court.
Are you sure you're not really close to like a military base or something, and it's
Pretty sure.
transmitting
I'm-
radio?
Yeah. Could
We're
be.
not that advanced, Dag, I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, but
Or maybe it got soaked in
People-
LSD at some point. I mean, let's really think about this. So
Yeah.
it whispers things to people in court.
that's great.
All I'm saying. So while I was heir, I took up rapier. To some degree, this is a tradition in Northshield for an otherwise non-martial consort to at least to take up the rapier. I did it for a number of reasons, even though I'm not an athletically inclined individual. And one of them was that I wanted to be able to lead my troops at Gulfport.
Mhm.
I did not just want to be standing at the top of the hill and say, "Go team." I wanted to be out there on the field with them. It was important to me. More important than I expected it to be, actually. Like I was originally like, okay, rapier is interesting and I should get to know the community, and this is a good way to do that. But as soon as the shiny hat was on my head, I was like, no. If I'm going to a war with this thing on my head, I'm going to be on that field. I might suck. I might suck terribly. And I honestly, if I killed anybody on the field, it was by accident.
I mean, isn't that true for most war fighting?
I
Let's be
suspect so.
honest here.
I suspect so. But it wound up meaning a lot. I did not, unfortunately, keep it up. I needed time back afterward. And that was the whole of it. I had enjoyed it while I was doing it, but I just didn't feel like I could continue to devote the time to something that, quite honestly, I didn't think I'd ever get really good at. But it was important to me to do, and I don't regret a minute of it. I particularly don't regret that I was able to lead my troops out on the field for the ravine battle at Gulf Wars.
That's very cool.
That was something else. That was quite an experience.
Which is one of the coolest battles in the SCA.
Yeah.
I can relate, though it's a little different. I had never ridden a horse, and when I was queen in our second reign, our friend Driffa, who is a accomplished horse person, took me out, and I got qualified to do, as an entry-level equestrian, though that really just means you can stop and start a horse and do some very basic things. But she put me on a lovely, very patient, very cooperative horse. And right after that, I became injured such that I can't ever do it again. So it was kind of the one time, and it was really successful. And she took her time out of her day to do that. And horses are big and scary, right, Joel?
Terrifying. Absolutely
They're terrifying. If you didn't grow up around horses, like they're very intimidating. And it was really special to me to get to do that and to overcome that kind of fear that I had. So, it's great even when you're in that position to think about like, oh, I can still do something that's, scary for me, because public speaking is not scary for me. So I had to do something super hard, and that was what I chose.
I've told my consort that if I ever won a crown where we would be on the throne at Gulf Wars, that I will ride a chariot behind the horses, but that's as good as it's going to get.
So this segues nicely into this photo.
Oh, hey, that segued perfectly.
Yeah, this segues nicely into this photo. This is Gulf Wars. This is the procession. And you'll notice that Frodo and I are not riding, but our heir, Evelyn, is. Conrad was not at war yet. He was coming later in the week, but Evelyn was there. We both had been planning to ride. We both rehearsed riding, which was like the first time I'd ever been on a horse either. So I knew exactly what you were talking about. Roder at a previous Gulf Wars had been thrown during practice. So he was actually a little skittish about it, but he was hoping to do it. And then the morning of, one of the two horses we were going to ride was just a little too ants in the pants for two fellas who were not entirely comfortable in the saddle.
Yeah.
And so we decided we would both walk and that Evelyn would ride behind us. And in the end, I think it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
And what is not obvious from this photo is that we are singing the whole way there.
Nice. Very nice.
This is the field battle, I think, or maybe one of the smaller tourneys. I don't actually remember the specific context, but yeah, at Gulf Wars, one of the few times I actually fought in public that was not just to practice. So, Bardic Madness, which is a tradition we have here, is great for royal face palms. And And Viscountess Elishava caught me at a great moment of face palming right here. That's about all I need to
And
say, really. I'm just,
and she is a extremely talented photographer that
yeah,
I've seen her her work before, and she does just
quite a,
amazing shots.
her photos don't tend to be watermarked. Quite a few of these photos are probably hers.
So shout
This is
out.
also from Gulf Wars. I just like the parasol. We had a bunch of purple parasols for sunshades for both the royals and for our retainers. There's a story behind the purple. Assuming the color's coming through well on the camera, you'll see that I have purple amethysts here that are both my pearls as a court baron now, but also my arms are or gulpy, which is basically yellow with purple polka dots. So that's where the purple.
Someone mentioned in the comments that you have one of the shortest blazons.
It is
Period.
one of two blazons that are the shortest possible. The other one is or hurty, which is blue polka dots. And in fact, I needed permission to conflict with the fellow who holds or gulp or hurty.
That's hilarious.
But in SEA's rules, it is not possible, to my knowledge, to get a shorter blazon in terms of number of characters.
Well, I'm a strong advocate and proponent for and of parasols. I think more people should use them. They are hard to document, but your skin is more important. And I don't care how much sunblock you use. It is no replacement for actually keeping the sun off your skin. And correct. I always use a parasol if I can, or I cover as much of my skin as I can. And I do use a lot of sunblock, but it's a little scary because if you don't put it on quite right, or you don't, it wears off, or it was old, you just don't know. So I applaud your use of a parasol, and it looks quite jaunty.
Thank you. I was feeling quite jaunty, as you can see in the photo. I am blessed with skin that does not burn easily. But a week at Gulf Wars, it was going to burn eventually if I was not careful. So
true, and even if you don't burn, yeah.
This photo is from First Coronation. So that is me heralding as Siegfried and Brodai crown themselves. What is not obvious in this photo, unless you're looking very carefully at the bottom, is that all of the territorial coronets, all of the peerage medallions, and all of the knight's chains are on a big rock, a big stone, a big granite altar that had been gifted to us, I think, by the Outlands, with a carved griffin on it. And it hadn't been planned. This part was not scripted, that as they were released by the Midrealm, they would all put their regalia on the stone, but they all did, and we just ran with it. And then when they started to take their oaths coming in, they received their regalia back from the stone. And the only part that was scripted was that the crowns themselves were on the stone.
I seem to remember from my Northshield time that being referred to as the BDR, or Big Damn Rock.
Big Damned Rock, yes.
So, because that was out in chat
hopefully,
for a while.
Yeah.
Hopefully people didn't treat it like a holiday gift exchange where you all put something in the pile and you take something that you didn't bring with you home.
No,
that works for bottles of wine, but not for regalia.
No, everyone was very good about it. I think there may have been a little bit of confusion, but for the most part, people found their own stuff.
That's great. What a cool thing.
This was like this.
See, I just assumed.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. We have a delay, so I know sometimes I start talking and you don't hear me right away. I was just going to say that I'm surprised that your first coronet or your first coronation didn't occur on an ice fishing lake. Like, why doesn't ice fishing factor into any of this? That seems really weird to me.
Because we're not that fond of the cold, really. So this day, the moments that this is part of. People talk about magic moments in the SCA. As the various estates were being released by the Midrealm, and they were putting their regalia on the rock. The knights in particular, but all the others too, I could see what it meant to them, because at that moment they were in fealty to nobody. They were in service to nobody. There was a brief interregnum during which they were peers, but they were not in fealty. And particularly for the knights, that was weird. Like one knight with a Japanese persona said, for that brief period of time, I was a Ronin. And that was weird for him. But also the emotion involved also when they were returned to them. Well, we do our fealties en masse by order. So it wasn't one by one. It was, all the knights come up, all the pelicans come up, all the laurels come up, all the territorials come up. But you could just feel the emotion of the moment. That was a magic moment for me. And another similar
Yeah, not
one,
everybody gets to experience that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
another similar one for me that I thought I was prepared for under the heading of things I would have told myself. Standing there as king consort, as Kagan, holding the axe with Roder, while the populace took their oath, the populace oath. Not prepared for what that was going to feel like.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe.
Oh,
That it's very emotional. And I think probably the first time we made a pier was really when it sunk in for me, because it was that moment where you're like, oh, we are creating a peer who's going to be a peer forever in the society. That's really something,
Yeah.
And those moments they really stick with you. So
no, that punched me in the stomach a little bit with those feels. So,
well, why don't you go on to your next question then, Joel? Because
I'm recovering. So actually, and what Dag just said about when you're recognizing someone as a peer, and I don't know if that's a semantics version or not, but I've always been taught that you're recognizing someone, and so I guess that's just the verbiage. Maybe that's a not Westernism thing. Your grace, Dag here.
hey, the crown is the maker of manners, so they get to style what they do any way they want to.
That's but having played for a while and just being in the position you're in, I'm sure you've poked into vigils or been lucky enough to recognize someone. What's the core of the advice that you like to give someone prior to being recognized as a peer of the realm, whether that's no matter what it is, or what would you say, is just, the basic core of the advice you like to impart on them?
The first thing that I usually tell them is kind of exactly what you just said, is you are being recognized for something you already are. You have already been doing this thing for a while. You did not just suddenly go ding against some magical barrier and
Stickers.
push through it. Stickers, right.
Collected
you
all the
didn't, Yeah, you didn't just check off the last check off in the manual and get your badge, right? Generally speaking, receiving a peerage, being recognized as a peer, in Northshield at least, is the result of a significant amount of time behaving like one already. Not in any of the pretentious ways, but in the sense of you are already teaching, you are already serving, you are already in the martial peerages, you are already at the pinnacle of your martial art. and you've been doing it for a while. And so you have demonstrated not just that like you had a good day, but that this is who you are. The flip side of that, though, and this was advice I was given at my vigil while I was eating the head off the cookie decorated like me. Remember Henry II. Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? Depending on which version of that story you hear, he did not think anyone was listening. He was just venting. He did not expect to be taken seriously. And yet he was, because he was the king. And he was angry. And someone wanted to do something about it. Remember your environment. Be aware. Be situationally aware. When you do things, when you say things, when you can be seen. Remember that tents are lousy walls. Because now people will be listening to what you say. Whether fairly or not, your words are now going to be amplified by what the crown is about to do.
That's right.
And you will never be able to get away from that. Because even if you decide to leave the society entirely, you are there still sending an amplified message as a peer. And I say this as someone who is currently on a bit of a break with society and has been public about it. Don't do it casually.
Yeah.
Know what you're doing, know what you're saying, know who you're saying it to and for.
Yeah. I had a moment where I realized how quickly the words have weight, which is that's a really, that's a great core of advice. But I had a moment at the very first event after I had been knighted that I made a mistake, not realizing the words I was using and when it was appropriate or not, because someone asked me, what I had learned when I was recognized as a knight. And I made a flippant joke about how white leather's fucking expensive, how white leather is expensive. And that was all I said, thinking it was an appropriate joke because the people that were around, minus the person who asked the question, knew me. And the guy that asked me that looked really crestfallen because I didn't give him a serious answer. I didn't realize at that moment. That was when I realized was at that moment that the words do have weight, and you
Yes,
need to know the appropriate time and know your audience. Also, I have to take a drink for dropping the F-bomb.
Oh, you have to put a quarter in the quarter jar, the virtual quarter jar.
I was going to keep drinking my Bud Light Seltzer as a punishment. Sorry, it's not good, by the way.
That's a pretty good punishment, actually.
For anyone playing along from home, this was not a good sponsor for this week's episode.
We're sending back all that sponsorship money that doesn't exist.
All right. Dag, I think it's you.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No,
it's me.
It's you.
All right. Sorry. I didn't know if the grayed out meant, sorry, for the behind the scenes.
We skip questions if they've already been answered. So sometimes, depending on how tired we are, it can be a little slow on the uptake. So
I'm always slow on the uptake, though. That's why everyone wants to joke around with me. So we've had some really serious things that I think were great. There's a lot of shortcomings in the SCA also. One of the ones that we like to actually bring up on a happier note, though, is if you could snap an award into existence, that any award that doesn't exist currently, you could just snap it into existence, no fallout, no political
drama,
anything along those lines. You don't have to go through all the polling, whatever. What would that award be? Why would you give it to me?
Why would you give it to Joel? You don't have to give it to him. Why would you not give it to him?
I don't know if I have a really great answer to this, but I will tell a short story that is sort of in the same vein as this. before we all had phones that had good cameras, that could take good pictures in all kinds of lighting conditions, people, of course, still use flash photography a lot. And as a herald, I did not want those things going off in my face. And so I would ask the Crown if I could ban flash photography from the court. It was always the Crown's decision. Always the Crown's decision. I was always very clear. It is the Crown's court. If they want flash photography, if they want those lights in their faces, I can't stop them. And if they said yes, I would almost always open court by saying the use of flash photography during the Court of Northshield is hereby prohibited, and violators will be inducted into the Order of the Glowing Purple Spot. Which is another reason I chose Or Gulpy for my heraldry. What else would I choose though? That one's hard. That one's very hard. Like, if you'd asked me this 5-6 years ago, I would have said, where's that rapier peerage? But of course we have one now. Where's that peerage for all the other martial orders? Would be my next answer, even though I participate in none of them.
Yeah. Well, funny, you don't have to benefit from a thing to be in favor of it. So
exactly. Where is that level of recognition in a non-ambiguous way for all the other martial activities, for archery, for thrown weapons, for equestrian, which the fact that there isn't a peerage for equestrian, when that's what the word knight and chevalier mean, is horse rider, really continues to boggle me.
And there have been, there's been a few guests who have mentioned, I can't remember what the formal name of it is, but it's been the omnibus peerage. And a few have mentioned that, and that's there's very strong opinions one way or the other regarding that. I think the proposed name was like the Order of Valiance, but I could be mistaken. If there's someone in the comments that knows more about that, you feel free to drop that. But yeah, a few people have mentioned that, and yeah, that's got one of those that there's strong opinions one way or the other on that.
So I think in terms of a serious answer, that would probably be it.
Yeah.
I still like the purple dots. I feel like that would go really well with the ass heralds that we've had on
the ass heralds. Yes. Oh, I don't know if you heard that the story about ass heralds. Rather than rehashing it, we can tell you another time, but suffice to say, someone immediately produced an illustration of what the ass heralds.
I have seen the illustration of the trumpet, and yes, it's a surprisingly common bit of illumination.
Yeah, but that's in reference to big ass heralds and not knowing there's ass heralds. Really? Who knew that? So, yeah, I know.
So, as a Northshielder, I'm sure Dub Dub is your regular favorite event, but what is your favorite out of? Okay, actually, you know what? That face is making me question that. What is your?
I got to be honest. I'm going to be non-diplomatic and honest. I actually no longer attend Dub Dub, even when I am being a more active participant. However, I want to be clear about my reasons. It's health. Dub Dub is almost always held on the very hottest weekend possible.
No.
It doesn't matter what the rest of the weather's doing that year. Somehow that weekend in July is the hottest, most humid weekend Wisconsin can produce. One year while I was there, wearing my garb and my Fitbit, I was just sitting, waiting for court. It was shady, there was a breeze, but it was still like 90 degrees and 90% humidity or something ridiculous like that. And I glanced down at my Fitbit and I see the heart rate monitor is in the 90s, along with the temperature and the humidity. And I'm like, this is from nothing but the stress on my body of being this warm and this uncomfortable. Yeah. I'm not doing this ever again.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
I've already got high blood pressure. I'm not doing this. It is literally bad for my health to be here. So,
in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of people that live on the west side of the mountains, which to us means the cold side, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And Ontario is a really big kingdom, and we have desert, we have rainforest, we
Yeah.
have every possible system and climate within just our kingdom, within Washington state alone, in fact.
Yeah.
So sometimes what will happen is it's similar where we will be, kind of accustomed to the earlier parts of summer in Western Washington, which are mitigated heavily by the ocean absorbing, a lot of that heat, and it stays cool for a lot longer. And then wham, late July and August can be very hot, or we travel to the other side of the state, or other parts of the kingdom that are hot. And you do see people just absolutely disintegrate in that heat, because they haven't been able to kind of acclimate up to that. It's probably similar to kingdoms where you have a lot of variations in the sea level as well. So how far away you are from sea level, and the elevation can really, really make a big difference in how people fight and all of that too.
The crown tournament 2 after hours was held in Leeds, South Dakota, which is a mile high.
Yeah.
In the Black Hills. It's one of the few times I can recall having something close to altitude sickness attending that crown.
Yeah.
That crown was also on the pretty much the far western edge of our kingdom, and a number of people complained about it. But I felt very strongly that every group in our kingdom has a right to host crown and coronation if they put in a bid that is otherwise viable. And people need to get in their cars and drive. We're a big, long, we are an incredibly expansive kingdom, right? We go from the tip of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the border between Montana and the Dakotas, and all the way up to the polar ice through Manitoba and Nunavut and Northern Ontario. We're huge.
Yeah.
And the truth is, most of it is empty.
Yeah.
Get in your car.
Right.
So what's your favorite in-kingdom event then?
Bardic Madness, which I helped to run a couple of times. It is Bardic Madness is held once a year, usually in the spring. It is organized in a set of fits and challenges. It is usually themed, so the challenges fit a theme. It is not a competition, however. It is a Bardic safe space. Get up and perform. Sing, tell a story, mime. If it's documentable, that's great, but if not, we value the courage you had to get up there on stage and do a thing, because that's hard.
I need another one like that, because I have tried to perform in Bardics and I'm terrified of it. I can fight in front of 200 people, no problem. I can do these interviews, no problem. For some reason, standing up in front of Bardic, it just terrifies me, which my laurel's actually a laurel in the Bardic arts. And so, you would think I'd be better at it, but I'm not. So what is the event on your bucket list in SC? What is one event on the world that you want to go to so bad, but you haven't been able to make it to yet?
I don't know if it's a specific event, but I'd love to get to an event in Drachenwald that is actually held in a historic site.
Yeah.
Like a Raglan or something like that.
Hey, in Ontario, we have events in Hiltons that are like 20 years old. So,
Yeah. They're pretty sure they got most of the asbestos out.
That's
So.
pretty elitist. I mean, come on.
Most of our events here in Northshield are held indoors for a large swath of the year, because we can only trust the weather from about late April until about mid-September.
Same.
And so we have a lot of events in churches and a lot of events in, used to be armories were common before 9/11. Armories were very common as social halls. And then after 9/11, they started ratcheting up and stopped being as open to it. Some schools
Mhm.
It depends on the district though, because some districts are like, oh no, you're violent.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you know, campgrounds and parks during the summer, but not a lot of it because there's a very narrow window. And August is dominated by Penzik, even though we are 1,000 miles away from the debatable lands.
Huh.
Um, so it really is May, June, July, and a little bit of August.
Yeah, those are our only camping months, certainly in Ontario. And we have places we can camp, but we don't, the weather can be really unpredictable. You know, the first time we stepped up, both times we rained were what we call, there's the summer rain and the winter rain. And the summer rain is where you step up in the summer. And so both of ours were summer rains. The first time we stepped up, we were in Willamette in Oregon, and it was so hot. The wool I was wearing was absolutely killing me. It was like stiflingly hot. And the second time it was just north of Seattle, not really that dramatically different in terms of of zone. And the rain was so horrible that we had dead rodents under all of our tents when we
Oh my God.
were taking up our tents because they were drowning in the mud and muck underneath our tents. So we get, I mean, and it was just miserable and cold. And so we, you know, you just really don't know here, even within those summer months. And it does make it tough to plan, and it makes it tough on rains when you're, you know, a coronation is a really big deal, and you don't know you don't know what to plan for at all, and how that's going to affect the people who are helping you, which can really be dramatic for them. So, yeah, you have, I think, well, we're similar anyway. So
our boundaries are different though in terms of when our rains are. Coronation is September and April, and then Crown is 1 month later in October and May. And almost always indoors. Crown is sometimes fought outdoors if we've got the right site and the weather cooperates. But one of the guidelines for a site for Crown is we have to have the option of fighting indoors, because in both October and May, it could snow.
I'll admit, I actually haven't been to a Counts area event yet. So we moved into Kingdom during, you know, the ongoing global bastard was doing its thing. And so we actually haven't had a chance to play with our new kingdom here, and we can't wait till everyone is able to get back safely.
Don't break it.
Oh man.
So Yehuda, I know you've done so many things over the years. You're a peer, and you're a royal peer. You've accomplished so much through your service and the different things that you've worked so hard to improve. I did hear you say you're taking a break right now, but I normally would ask you what keeps you in the SCA and what inspires you. So maybe instead, what I'd like to ask is, what do you think will inspire you to return to the SCA when you do?
So it's still not an invalid question, because part of what's keeping me away right now is that the electronic SCA really doesn't do it for me for the most part. And that's ironic, given that I'm the one who brought commentary online, right? I'm a software engineer. I live my life online. I used to run the Kingdom mailing list and the server there. Right? You'd think I'd be all into it, but I'm really kind of not. And how much of that is coinciding with also needing a break versus I'm really just not. I have helped to run one event because a friend of mine asked me to assist with the Zoom engineering for we called it That's a Beautiful Event. It was the first symposium on medieval beauty cosmetic scent. And it was something that I had been encouraging the steward Kasia to do. To do. And so when she asked me to help, I'm like, yes, I'll help. Didn't even think about it, even though I am taking this break. What would bring me back? You know, that varies. There are days when I see some of the ways we still allow racism, sexism, all the rest of it. We allow some of the people that I think in terms of now as bad actors to play in our society. And I'm like, I don't want to associate with that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what's turning me off, to be honest, is not my kingdom, not Northshield, not my people. It's the organization, it's the corporation that I don't feel is doing enough. I don't feel they're doing the right things. I feel they're inconsistent when they do anything. And very often the rules feel like they are mainly about protecting the corporation's legal butt and not about protecting the participants and the diversity of the society. And I don't know how to fix that. That's the worst part. I'd love to be able to, you talked about waving a wand, creating an award. I'd like to wave a wand and fix this problem in a way that also would survive a legal challenge.
Yeah.
And I can't. I have no magic formula for doing that. And this is something I face not only as a continuing participant and peer here in the SCA, but I am a board member for a convention we run here in the Twin Cities called Convergence. In a non-pandemic year, we could have 7,000 people at that con. It is all volunteer run, nonprofit. The only volunteer run nonprofit thing that's bigger is the Penzic War. And one of the, actually, I'll take that back, just in case someone who knows is in the audience. I want to be honest. There is another con here in the Twin Cities called Anime Detour that we've been sort of horse racing with. So I think the last time they ran Anime Detour, it was larger than the last time we ran Convergence. But these two together, the only thing bigger that is all volunteer and all nonprofit is the Penzic War. I'm on the board for that, and we have the same problems. We have the same concerns. The main difference is because we're all about running a single event, it's a little easier to set the rules the way we want, and we're all in agreement. So we have said, there's a certain kind of person we're not going to include because they don't want to include everybody else.
Right.
We're not going to give in to the paradox of tolerance. But it's not easy when you are spread out as far as the SCA is and have as many people involved.
Yep.
How do you police that? I don't have an answer. I have
Yep.
no good answer.
Yeah. Well, and as we were talking about in the period before we actually started the interview, it can be really tough when you have new people coming to events, to try and scan them for signs of visible racism or whatever ism. But I also, I'm a white woman and, have lots of privilege in the SCA, and I can take the hit of possibly making somebody angry by inquiring about their biases and potential hatefulness that they're bringing with them. But I do appreciate that for someone, for example, who identifies as Jewish, or someone who identifies as somebody that's historically marginalized, or for a person of color, the cost is much higher to feel safe, and the bar is set higher for someone like you than it is for me, and I know that. And yet
the truth is that unless I'm right up front, like if I haven't told you my name and you don't recognize it's a Hebrew name,
right.
I mean, maybe the nose gives it away, but I'm not.
I sure hope that's not what people are looking at.
Right. I'm not my point is that for all intents and purposes to a stranger, I'm a white guy. And as a white guy, I have the same responsibilities to open doors, to bring people in, to find ways to make them feel included.
Yeah.
And to screen for the people who aren't going to do that. Screen for the people who aren't going to welcome those people that I'm saying, hey, come join us.
Yep. Yep.
There is a place for you here.
I had a friend of mine when they were recognized and they said, I just wanted to thank you for always treating me as a fighter instead of as X. And it caught me so off guard because I never like I'm in my own little privileged bubble here. And I'm always very honest about that I'm in my own little privileged bubble and that I don't know that I'm in it until my friends tell me, hey, check this out. Look at this. Hey, don't, and but when they said that, it caught me so off guard because it's one of those things that like I don't realize how pronounced some of the issues within the SCA still are, and how we've made fantastic progress in equality, but we still have a long ways to go. We still have a very long ways to go, and I think as bad as as much as we all miss um, being together and being in person in the ESCA, which but one of the great things is that a lot of assholes have outed themselves and they're not going to be there anymore when we get back to being able to play with in person.
It's a good
So
point.
I mean, maybe
But-
that's the sunny side, right?
But at the same time, during this period, we have lost some of those marginalized people.
Yeah.
Who won't
Yeah.
come back. Some of them are peers, and they're not coming back.
Yeah.
And it's because,
Yeah.
in part, because we failed to act sooner. And in part because
Yeah.
they don't entirely trust that when we're all back together, we're going to continue to push those people, to push the white supremacists, the racists, the sexists to the side.
Yeah.
That we're going to stand tall for my SCA is for everybody.
It's a really good point, and I think there's a piece that we often don't address, and that is because we so often have these procedures, grievance procedures, or processes for people to pursue some kind of fairness or justice. They can make people feel very vulnerable to do that, but also, we're always thinking about protecting people's reputations or privacy. And so there's a lot of missing stairs around us, not just in the traditional sense of somebody who might be a sexual predator, but there's other kinds of missing stairs or broken stairs. And so we don't see those people, their reputations don't end up affected, and we don't know who they are. So then people think they're alone in their experiences with them. Right. I am a big proponent of restorative justice because I think that one of the benefits of restorative justice is that it puts this conversation in the open if the participants are willing to have it that way. So there's an opportunity often with restorative justice to negotiate that in good faith and say, how should we handle this? And the person who's been harmed can say, I want to make sure that people know this is something that's happening and that it's being dealt with, and the participants have an opportunity to opt in to something like that. So I think that there's a lot of stuff happening, kind of in the modern world that we could look at. But there's also this weird tendency for people to say, well, I don't want modern politics or these modernities to make it into the SCA. And it's like, this civil rights and human rights are not politics. And if they are, that's weird to me that you would consider that
problem all by itself. Yeah.
That's a problem. So
if a new sidewalk gets funded, politics
right.
are not human rights. So let's be clear on that one.
I don't remember the exact quote, but Neil Gaiman in the Sandman comic book series, he did an episode involving a character who is essentially immortal. And he goes to a Renfest. And he is ranting. He is incensed because he lived through the Middle Ages. And he's like, this is not about the Middle Ages. This is about right now. That's how I feel about the SCA, quite honestly. It's a lot of fun. When we actually dig into the research, that's a lot of fun too, right?
Yep.
It's important
That's right.
that we try to actually, one of the things we do is try to figure out when we do this research, how did they actually practically use this stuff? It's one thing to see an artifact in a museum, it's another thing to try to cook with it or try to wear it. But in the end, it's a garden party with ideas above its station, whose attendees never went home. We're still in that park in Berkeley in 1966.
That's funny because I call it a fancy dress cocktail party in a cow pasture. It's kind of the same thing. So
yes.
Yeah.
It is a big whopping hunk of right now. It is a part of our everyday modern lives. If it's just one party once, you can say it's a protest against modernity. And you've done it once, and then you went back to your life. If you're doing it all the time, if it's an integral hobby of your life, then it's still a part of your modern world. It's a part of your everyday. We choose to import and choose to enact certain ideals that, oh, by the way, were more honored in the breach in their time, and that's why they were ideals. Most of the culture of chivalry existed to try to rein in a culture of brigandry.
Yeah.
Right? So we are trying to bring the true ideals, not of might makes right, but of justice, of mercy, of moderation, compassion,
Yeah. Generosity.
all of those things. These are the kinds of things that I feel we should be standing for. If we're going to stand for a historical ideal at all, not the historical details of how you can put other people down or lord it over other people. That side of bringing the Middle Ages into the modern world, I'm okay with. That's why I'm here. But if you try to say this is an escape from the modern world, I'm going to tell you every time there is no escape from the modern world. This is the life we live. This is the lovely costume I'm wearing. This hat does mean quite a bit to me. And it's not something I can wear anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's not just a piece of costume jewelry for me. But in the end, it's also a part of my modern life. I led a large organization as Kagan, as king, for 6 months. And I didn't just lead them as a player in a play. I led them as an officer of an organization living in the modern world. And I tried to do both at the same time. Hard, very hard.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't undo a minute of it.
Well, we're super fortunate to have had the 2 hours tonight talking with you. I know that ran a little longer than we had originally said it would last, but I wouldn't take back a minute of this either. This has been really wonderful. Yeah, we do have one final thing that we always do, which is give you a virtual gift basket, as though we are all sitting in state and throwing gift baskets at each other willy-nilly. And since it's a virtual gift basket, we can put anything we want in it. And I would have already had my people talk to your people and find out what your preferences were. But since I didn't do that, I will just have to ask you, do you prefer milk or dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. Red or white wine?
I can't drink wine. I'm allergic to grapes.
Okay, then what's your spirit of choice?
Single malt scotch.
Okay, clearly not White Claw, so that's good.
not Bud Light Seltzer.
No,
And then puppies or kittens?
kittens. I like puppies.
Kittens.
Don't get me
Okay.
wrong, but nothing about my life says dogs. We have
Okay,
cats.
fair enough. Well, fortunately, it's not an enduring commitment for the purposes of this gift basket. So first of all, as our audience knows, I am on a rant always against baskets with handles. They are impossible to pack in your car after the event. So we are giving you a basket, or maybe even like a really beautiful silk bag, which would probably be more appropriate for your persona. With your gift items in it. And so we definitely have some wonderful chocolatiers here in Seattle. And you will be treated to an assortment of Theo's chocolates. And if you're ever in Seattle, you can tour the chocolate factory, which smells just as good as you can imagine.
I can only imagine.
And yeah, they're not going to let me probably on the airplane with as much single malt scotch as I think you deserve for this interview. But I'm sure my husband's the scotch drinker. I think it tastes like Band-Aids that have been soaking in rubbing alcohol.
It is
So
not for
I will let
everybody.
I'll let him pick out something appropriate and, as I like to say, at eye level or higher in the liquor store. Don't ever buy below eye level. It's important. And then definitely what we like to do is just offer you the opportunity to go into a very small room with a litter of kittens and just roll around with them for as long as you need to in an outfit that will not snag. And
Definitely not this one.
yeah, no. And then you get to give the kittens back, because foisting pet ownership on someone is not something that we do here. And then because I can put anything in the world that I want in it, I think the other thing I would do is make you some really clever fans that look like hands. And the reason is, when we're all back going to events, I want you to be able to go to that wonderful Bardic event and face palm without touching your face, because we might still be worried about virus transmission. And I don't want you to have to actually touch your face. So it'll look just like your hand, but on a stick, which is not creepy at all. So you can face palm all you want and then not worry. So that would be in the gift basket. Joel, do you want to add anything?
My goodness, no, I can't beat that right now. You can borrow my miniature schnauzer, because when you guys are talking about cats, my dog actually is snoring just off camera. So I mean, you can borrow that. She's basically a cat, but I can't beat a hand on a stick, because I mean, there's so many versatile uses for that. So Dag wins tonight. I can't beat that. So
the best gifts are the ones that create more questions than they answer. So that would be.
And I did see in the comments that my lovely wife and consort is sold on the idea of Bardic Madness. So once that is happening again, we'll make the trip up.
Is she the one that's been heckling you?
Yeah, she was the one saying that. Well, yeah, you're riding a horse, and man, we're going and stuff. Yeah, that was her. So once we get past everything here, and once we're on the other side of this, we will be playing in Northshield as much as we are in Palantir. We're in a beautiful area where we can do both. We're looking forward to that. Your Excellency, holy cow! Thank you so much for this interview. This was great. This was such a good conversation. I really enjoyed this. For everyone watching from home, you know how much we appreciate your time. We love y'all, and the normal things are going to be coming out here. We're New Year membership, so we have an SCA to come back to. Wear your mask, believe in science, be kind to each other. Next week, we'll be joined by Duchess Conlyac of the Outlands. Stay tuned, but for now, thank you so much, everyone. We love you. We will see you next week. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.